For decades, the galaxy had been under the shadow of a terrifying fleet. They came without mercy, without hesitation, and without any concern for the lives they destroyed. Entire civilizations vanished almost overnight. Their homes turned into rubble, their people either enslaved or scattered across the stars. Wherever they went, they left chaos behind. Systems that had once thrived were reduced to silent planets, their cities hollow, their skies empty. The invaders didn't just take resources, they took hope. They made sure that no one dared to rise against them, teaching fear to every corner of the galaxy. Every race, every world had learned the same lesson: resist, and you would vanish. The alien fleet became more than just a military force. It became a legend of horror. Ships that tried to fight them were quickly destroyed. Supply routes were cut. Communication networks were hacked or disabled. Every attempt at rebellion ended in flames. The leaders of the galaxy watched helplessly as their fleets fell one by one. Entire alliances crumbled not because they lacked courage, but because the enemy's power seemed unstoppable. Yet even in these dark times, whispers of resistance existed. Small groups of fighters hidden deep on remote planets passed secret messages, plotting and hoping that one day someone would challenge the invaders. But these whispers were faint, often ignored, often crushed before they could grow. Every star system under attack learned quickly that survival depended on hiding, running, and praying that the alien fleet would pass them by. And for the most part, that was all they could do. On one of the outermost planets, a small settlement watched the sky with nervous eyes. Unlike the major worlds, it hadn't been important enough for the aliens to notice yet. People there lived simple lives, trying to work the land, mine resources, or maintain small fleets for trade and defense. They had heard the stories, of course, the tales of destruction that came from the center of the galaxy. Even children knew the fear in the voices of their elders. Nights were quiet, but every shadow, every flicker of light in the sky could bring panic. The alien fleet might appear at any time. And then one day something unusual happened. The scanners picked up a signal, faint but clear, moving deliberately toward their region of space. It wasn't like the signals they usually received, chaotic, frantic messages from fleeing ships. This one was different, precise, calm, strong. Whoever or whatever was behind it knew where it was going, and it moved with purpose. At first, many dismissed it. Perhaps it was a natural phenomenon, or a malfunction in the equipment. But as the signal grew closer, the elders and leaders of the settlement began to realize this was something extraordinary. News traveled fast, even in a galaxy used to fear. Other nearby systems picked up similar signals, though no one knew exactly what it meant. The aliens, too, noticed something unusual on their scanners. Ships that had once faced no challenge now detected something new, something unlike anything they had encountered before. Their arrogance faltered for the first time in decades. No one had ever dared to approach their territory with such precision. Their sensors picked up a massive object moving steadily, unafraid, unflinching, as if it belonged there. The aliens' commanders called urgent meetings. They examined star maps, double-checked intelligence, and scanned the approaching object with every tool at their disposal. Nothing matched it. No fleet records, no known technology. Nothing in the galaxy's history suggested that this was possible. The invaders, who had believed themselves unstoppable, felt a flicker of unease. It was small at first, almost laughable to them, but it grew with each passing moment. Meanwhile, on the small settlement watching the stars, hope began to bloom quietly. People whispered to each other in awe. "Maybe it's our salvation," one person said. Others shook their heads, trying to temper the excitement. For so long, fear had dominated their lives, teaching them to hide, to run, to never dream of victory. And yet this signal, this approaching presence, seemed to carry a promise that they hadn't dared to imagine in decades. It moved with certainty, as if it had an answer to the terror that had ruled the galaxy. And so the galaxy waited. The alien fleet continued its raids, still believing themselves the ultimate power, but with an unspoken question, growing in the minds of every commander. What was coming? Who was coming? And could it truly challenge them? For the first time, the balance of fear felt uncertain. The shadows that had loomed for generations were about to meet something new. Something human. The story of fear and chaos had ruled the galaxy for decades. Entire civilizations had learned to bend or break under it. But the appearance of that signal, that unknown presence moving steadily toward the center of destruction, began to change everything. Somewhere in the midst of despair, a spark of hope had been lit, and the galaxy, unknowingly, was about to witness a confrontation it would never forget. Even before the signal reached the edges of the galaxy, people everywhere began to notice changes in the atmosphere of fear. On planets that had once been paralyzed with terror, whispers of curiosity and cautious hope began to spread. The signal was no ordinary message. No random blip in space, it was a sign that something new, something alive and determined, was moving deliberately toward the core systems that had suffered under the alien fleet for decades. In the outermost colonies, people gathered around scanners, their eyes glued to the flickering screens. Families huddled together as the data came in. Scientists and technicians were called in from nearby worlds, though even they struggled to make sense of what they saw. The signal was immense, far larger than anything their instruments had recorded before. Its trajectory was precise, not random. Unlike fleeing ships that zigzagged to avoid detection, this vessel, or perhaps fleet, moved confidently as if it knew it was expected, as if it had a purpose the galaxy could not yet understand. The alien fleet, which had ruled through fear and destruction, felt the first stirrings of concern. They had always assumed that no civilization could challenge them openly, that no one had the courage or the ability to confront their might. Their invasions had been clean, efficient, almost routine. But now reports began to trickle in from scouts and forward ships. A massive unknown ship, or ships, was heading directly toward their territories, moving fast and steadily. The invaders' first instinct was disbelief. Their scanners were the most advanced in the galaxy. Nothing should have been able to reach this far without detection. As the days passed, the presence of this vessel became impossible to ignore. On planets that had suffered repeated raids, people began to whisper. Could it be real? They asked one another. Could someone actually be coming to fight them? The notion seemed too bold to believe. For generations, the alien fleet had been untouchable. Entire fleets had been destroyed by them without warning. And yet here was something moving across light years with confidence and purpose. Among the alien commanders, tension grew. Meetings that were usually routine became heated debates. Some dismissed the readings, suggesting technical errors or glitches. Others argued that if the vessel was real, it could represent a threat unlike any they had ever faced. For the first time, fear began to creep into their ranks. It was subtle at first, just an uneasy feeling beneath their confidence. But every time a new scan confirmed the ship's approach, that unease grew stronger. The invaders had always relied on overwhelming numbers and superior firepower. They had never faced an enemy that seemed both calculated and unafraid. Meanwhile, in the quiet corners of the galaxy, people began to watch and wait. Resistance groups that had long struggled in secret began to feel a flicker of hope. These were the hidden fighters, the ones who had watched entire civilizations fall and had learned to survive in shadows. They had long dreamed of someone who could challenge the alien fleet. Now that dream seemed within reach. They shared the news carefully, knowing that any false hope could be disastrous. But the spark was impossible to ignore. On one small rocky planet, a group of engineers and scientists gathered around a large communications array. They were not soldiers. They were ordinary people who had learned to live under the shadow of fear. And yet they found themselves staring at the readings with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The signal was unlike anything they had seen. Its energy signature suggested incredible power, but the movement indicated intelligence. It wasn't wandering blindly through space. It was coming straight for the systems that had been overrun by the alien fleet. The mood across the galaxy began to shift. People who had long hidden their fear started to talk cautiously about hope. Even those who had lost everything began to imagine the possibility of change. Rumors spread quickly from system to system. Traders, miners, and explorers shared stories of the approaching vessel. Each report added to the sense of anticipation. The unknown human presence was no longer just a signal. It had become a symbol, something people could cling to in the absence of victory for generations. The alien fleet, on the other hand, grew more restless. Commanders sent reconnaissance units to intercept or identify the vessel, but the unknown ship always stayed just out of reach. It moved faster than expected, always staying several light years ahead of any interception attempts. The invaders began to suspect that this was no ordinary ship. Perhaps it was armed with technology they had never seen, or maybe it carried a crew with tactical intelligence that rivaled their own. Either way, the fleet could no longer operate with the same confidence. On a nearby planet, ordinary citizens watched the sky. Children pointed to the stars, asking questions their parents could barely answer. "Who is coming?" they asked. "Can they really stop the aliens?" Adults exchanged uncertain glances, unsure how to respond. They had grown up with fear as a constant companion. To even speak of hope felt dangerous, almost rebellious. And yet, for the first time, the idea that someone could challenge the invaders felt real. Scientists and strategists began to speculate. They tried to guess the motives of this approaching ship. Was it here to negotiate, to observe, or to fight? The readings suggested preparation, weapons and armor far beyond anything currently cataloged. Its presence wasn't just passive, it was assertive, as if it had come to change the balance of power in the galaxy. Even the alien fleet began to recognize the limits of their knowledge. They had conquered civilizations across countless systems, yet they had never faced an opponent with such confidence. Every attempt to predict its behavior failed. Every strategy they devised was met with movement or countermeasures they couldn't anticipate. The aliens, who had always relied on fear as a weapon, found themselves facing something that couldn't be intimidated. For the first time in decades, they were not the hunters. They were being watched, assessed, and challenged. The signal kept growing stronger. Its approach was steady, unstoppable, as if guided by purpose itself. Star systems that had long been under siege began to prepare, cautiously, secretly, for what might come. Some sent messages to others suggesting coordinated defense, while others simply watched, unsure what to expect. The presence of this human vessel, or fleet, ignited courage in people who had been conditioned to despair. On the front lines of the alien fleet, scouts reported strange readings. The approaching vessel seemed capable of intelligence, speed, and precision that matched the most advanced alien technology. Some captains tried to engage it, only to find themselves outmaneuvered without a single shot fired. Confusion spread across the fleet. The confidence that had once allowed them to dominate entire galaxies was beginning to falter. Back on the small planets and colonies, ordinary citizens felt a shift. People who had spent their lives hiding began to emerge, sharing information, repairing old ships, and preparing, quietly, for a new possibility. Hope was no longer abstract. It was real, tangible, and anchored to the presence of the approaching ship. As days turned into weeks, the tension in the galaxy grew. The aliens had no idea who or what they were facing, and the humans, though still distant, moved with precision and intent. Every scan, every report reinforced the growing belief that the balance of power might finally be challenged. The galaxy, long dominated by fear, now stood at the edge of something new, something powerful, something human. And so, as the unknown vessel steadily approached the regions devastated by decades of alien conquest, the galaxy held its breath. People dared to imagine that maybe, just maybe, the era of endless fear was coming to an end. The signal was more than a movement across space. It was a promise that the story of oppression might finally meet its first real challenge. After weeks of scanning and speculation, the unknown vessel finally became impossible to ignore. It had grown from a faint, mysterious signal into a massive presence in space, moving with certainty toward the systems that had long suffered under alien rule. For the first time in decades, people across the galaxy could actually see it, not as a distant blip on a screen, but as a real solid ship, enormous and unlike anything anyone had seen before. Its shape was strange and unfamiliar, unlike the sleek designs of the invaders. Yet there was strength in its form, an aura of purpose that seemed to radiate from every hull panel, every engine glow. On planets that had been quietly hiding, citizens stopped their usual routines to watch the sky. Some gathered around public screens. Others climbed hills or rooftops just to see the approaching vessel with their own eyes. Children whispered questions and parents exchanged looks that carried both hope and fear. The world had grown so used to destruction that even the sight of a single ship moving confidently across the stars felt revolutionary. People who had long stopped dreaming now dared to imagine that change was possible. The alien fleet, which had ruled through fear for generations, first detected the ship with disbelief. Their scouts reported a massive object approaching their controlled systems, but initial reports were dismissed as errors or exaggerations. Then more details came in. Shields stronger than anything cataloged, engines capable of speed and maneuverability beyond known limits, weapons arrays that could strike multiple targets with precision. The fleet began to understand that this was not an ordinary ship. It was not a scout or a supply vessel. It was a force that had come with intent. Commanders of the alien fleet convened, their usual confidence replaced by tension. They had faced skilled opponents before, but none had ever shown this level of intelligence, precision, and audacity. Every plan they devised seemed inadequate. Even their most advanced ships, built to dominate entire fleets, were unable to anticipate the movements of this unknown human vessel. It moved with strategy, predicting the fleet's actions almost before they occurred. The aliens, masters of intimidation and destruction, found themselves unsettled for the first time. Meanwhile, the humans aboard the ship were calm and deliberate. They were not soldiers seeking glory, nor were they invaders. Their mission was clear: protect, observe, and challenge the invaders in a way that could save countless lives. They had trained for this moment, prepared for the strategies and tactics that the alien fleet might employ. Yet they also knew the risks. Their numbers were far fewer than the enemy, and a single misstep could lead to disaster. Despite this, there was no hesitation, no fear. Every crew member moved with quiet confidence, trusting in their training and in each other. As the ship entered the outer edges of the pillaged systems, it became visible to the aliens. Their scanners locked onto it, registering its size, energy output, and movement patterns. For the first time, the invaders faced something they could not instantly destroy or intimidate. The ship did not flee. It did not hesitate. It moved forward, steady and deliberate, like a predator with a purpose. Alien commanders tried to rally their fleets to intercept, but the humans anticipated their maneuvers, avoiding confrontation without retreating. On the planets below, people felt the shift in the air. Long forced into hiding, they now looked up with a mixture of awe and hope. Resistance groups, which had spent decades in secrecy, saw an opportunity they had never dared to imagine. They began communicating, coordinating quietly, hoping that the human vessel could tip the balance in their favor. Every sensor reading, every sighting of the ship in local space, strengthened the belief that the invaders' reign might be challenged at last. The first real encounter occurred near a cluster of heavily mined planets. Alien ships moved in formation, intending to surround the human vessel and crush it before it could cause disruption. But the humans did not panic. Instead, the ship maneuvered with remarkable speed and precision, dodging attacks that should have destroyed it. Its weapons, calibrated for accuracy rather than destruction, disabled several alien ships without causing unnecessary damage to the planets below. The aliens realized with growing unease that they were not just facing a powerful vessel. They were facing an opponent with intelligence and strategy. On board the human ship, the crew monitored every movement of the alien fleet. They calculated trajectories, assessed weaknesses, and executed maneuvers with precision. Unlike the alien forces, they did not rely solely on overwhelming numbers or brute strength. Every action was thoughtful, deliberate, and coordinated. The crew worked in harmony, anticipating threats before they arrived, responding in ways that disrupted the alien fleet's expectations. For the first time, the invaders felt the uncertainty of battle, the tension of facing an enemy that could outthink them. Across the galaxy, the impact of this encounter was immediate. Reports of the battle spread quickly from system to system. Even planets that had been silent for decades began to speak, share intelligence, and prepare for what might come next. The human vessel had become more than a ship. It had become a symbol of hope, a signal that resistance was possible. People who had long lived under fear and oppression began to believe that change was coming. The alien fleet struggled to adapt. Their traditional tactics, based on overwhelming force and fear, were ineffective. Every attempt to predict the human ship's behavior failed. Each maneuver was countered with precision. The invaders, who had once believed themselves unbeatable, now faced the shocking reality that they could be outmatched, outthought, and potentially defeated. Even their most confident commanders began to doubt, a feeling they had not experienced in decades. The human crew remained focused, never underestimating the threat. They knew that a single mistake could endanger not only themselves, but countless civilians across the systems. Their approach was strategic, designed to protect as much as to challenge. They struck where the aliens were vulnerable, avoided unnecessary destruction, and sent a clear message. The invaders were no longer untouchable. The humans were not just another fleet. They were a force with purpose, determination, and courage. Meanwhile, the citizens of the systems under siege watched and waited. They had never seen such courage. They had never imagined that a single ship could make such a difference. And yet here it was, moving with precision, striking with intelligence, and giving hope to millions who had long given up. The human vessel was more than technology. It was the embodiment of resilience, ingenuity, and the belief that no force, no matter how powerful, was beyond challenge. As the battle continued, the alien fleet realized that they could not simply destroy this ship. Its speed, intelligence, and tactics made it impossible to overwhelm with brute force. Every engagement resulted in losses, confusion, and frustration. For the first time, the invaders felt what it was like to be hunted, outmaneuvered, and unsure of the outcome. They had ruled through fear for decades, but now they faced an opponent who could match their cunning and exceed their expectations. In the skies above the pillaged planets, ordinary citizens witnessed the turning point. They saw alien ships disabled without the loss of civilian life. They watched the human vessel move with precision and control, and they began to hope. Hope that the reign of terror could end, that courage and intelligence could outmatch brute force. The human vessel was no longer just a ship, it was a beacon, showing that even in the darkest times one determined force could change everything. And so, as the unknown vessel continued its approach, the galaxy held its breath. Systems that had long been silent now spoke in whispers of hope. Resistance movements grew bolder. Citizens who had spent years hiding now dared to imagine freedom. And the alien fleet, once confident in its dominance, began to understand that the balance of power had shifted. For the first time in decades, the galaxy was no longer under complete control. Something human had arrived, and it was about to change everything. The first real battle had arrived, and the galaxy watched with bated breath. For decades, the alien fleet had ruled through terror, striking without warning and leaving entire systems in ruin. But now, for the first time, they were met with a force that refused to flee. A force that did not panic under overwhelming numbers. The human battleship had arrived at a cluster of planets the aliens had been pillaging for generations, and it was ready to confront them head-on. From orbit above one of the most devastated planets, the human vessel moved deliberately. Its crew, trained for precision and strategy, prepared for the encounter. Every system was checked, every weapon calibrated, every sensor adjusted. They were outnumbered, certainly, but that mattered little when intelligence and coordination could turn the tide. They did not attack recklessly. They did not seek glory. Their mission was simple: protect the innocent and challenge the invaders in a way that had never been done before. Below, the citizens of the planet had gathered secretly on the remnants of hills and ruined cities. They could not intervene, of course, but they watched with hope, seeing the massive human ship for the first time. It was unlike anything they had ever known, strong, precise, and almost alive in its movements. Generations had grown up under the shadow of fear, and now, for the first time, they dared to hope that the nightmare might end. The alien fleet, expecting an easy confrontation, moved in with confidence. Their ships formed formations designed to encircle and destroy the human vessel quickly. Hundreds of vessels, some of the largest and most destructive the galaxy had ever seen, advanced toward the target. In their minds, victory was guaranteed. They had faced smaller fleets, even clever opponents, and crushed them. What made them confident now was the sheer number of ships they commanded. But they underestimated the humans' understanding of strategy. As the alien ships approached, the human battleship did not remain idle. It moved with incredible speed and precision, dodging attacks that would have destroyed any ordinary ship. Its shields held firm against the first volleys of laser and plasma fire. And then it struck. Weapons fired with precision, targeting key systems on the alien vessels. The goal was not unnecessary destruction, but disabling and neutralizing the most dangerous threats. Within moments, several ships were rendered inoperable, their movements stopped cold. The alien commanders were shocked. Their attacks had been calculated for success, yet the humans anticipated their moves. Every maneuver the aliens tried was countered with a strategy they had not foreseen. It was as though the human vessel could read the battle before it unfolded, predicting actions and neutralizing threats before they became critical. For the first time, the invaders felt uncertainty, a feeling foreign and deeply uncomfortable. Below, people could feel the change in the air. Citizens who had long hidden in fear began to whisper among themselves. Some dared to hope openly, Resistance groups, previously isolated and cautious, shared information through secure channels, spreading news of the human vessel's precision and courage. Each victory, however small, became a symbol of possibility. The centuries of terror that had dominated the galaxy seemed to falter in the face of one determined force. The battle raged in the asteroid field surrounding the planet. The aliens attempted to use the terrain to their advantage, hoping to trap the human vessel. Asteroids the size of cities floated through the void, and alien ships tried to weave between them to strike. But the humans were prepared. Maneuvering with skill, the battleship used the same asteroids to its advantage, striking from unexpected angles and avoiding attacks with precise calculations. The aliens realized that their overwhelming numbers could not simply overpower this force. Intelligence and strategy mattered more than raw strength. On board the human ship, the crew worked in flawless coordination. Every pilot, engineer, and operator knew their role. Every weapon was used efficiently. Every movement was deliberate. Unlike the alien fleet, which relied on brute force and intimidation, the humans understood timing, placement, and anticipation. Each strike was calculated not to destroy blindly, but to shift the balance of power in the battlefield. Every success, every evasive maneuver, built confidence among the crew and inspiration for the galaxy below. The aliens, growing desperate, tried to regroup. They sent reinforcements, deploying larger ships to overwhelm the human vessel. Yet every reinforcement's movement was anticipated. The humans used decoys, feints, and unexpected attacks, neutralizing the threat without exposing themselves to danger. It became clear that this was not just a battle. It was a demonstration of tactical brilliance. The invaders were facing a force that could think several steps ahead, a force that refused to be intimidated by fear or numbers. Across the systems under the alien reign, the impact of the battle became apparent. Word spread through transmissions, often hacked or relayed in secret, of the human success. Entire communities, long resigned to despair, dared to believe that change was possible. People who had once hidden their identities and voices began to organize, share information, and prepare quietly for what might come next. The human vessel had not only engaged the enemy, it had inspired a movement. As the battle continued, alien ships began to suffer losses they had never anticipated. Precision strikes disabled engines, weapon systems, and shields. Their attempts to intimidate and overwhelm failed repeatedly. Even their largest ships, previously seen as invincible, were forced into defensive positions. The invaders, who had once ruled with complete confidence, now faced doubt and confusion. For the first time, fear had returned to their ranks, not the fear they had imposed, but the fear they had long suppressed. The human crew remained calm. They were not reckless, nor were they overconfident. They knew the stakes. Millions of lives hung in the balance, and one wrong decision could result in disaster. Yet every action was deliberate. Every movement, every shot, every defensive maneuver was precise. They worked as one, a team guided by purpose and intelligence, and their effectiveness in battle was unmatched. On the planet below, the civilians watched the battle unfold with wide eyes. Ships moved like chess pieces across the stars, striking, dodging, and neutralizing threats with intelligence and skill. People who had grown up hiding in fear now whispered of courage, of hope, and of the possibility that the alien reign could end. Children who had only known terror looked up at the sky and saw something inspiring, something powerful, and something human. As the first battle drew to a close, the aliens began to retreat. Their confidence shattered. They realized that brute force alone would not win against this human vessel. It was not invincible, certainly, but it was precise, intelligent, and relentless. The humans had demonstrated something the invaders could not understand: that courage, strategy, and determination could outmatch even overwhelming numbers. The human ship did not celebrate. Its mission was far from complete. Yet the crew knew they had achieved something extraordinary. They had struck a blow against the invaders that would echo across the galaxy. For the first time, systems that had been silent for decades could hope. Resistance groups could organize openly. And the alien fleet, for all its size and power, had learned a lesson it had never faced before. Fear alone was not enough to dominate the galaxy. The victory was more than tactical. It was symbolic. For generations, civilizations had endured oppression and terror, believing that nothing could challenge the invaders. And now a single human battleship had proven that courage, intelligence and determination could change the course of history. The battle was only the beginning, but it had shifted the balance. The galaxy had seen what was possible and hope had been reborn. After the first battle, the galaxy began to shift. The alien fleet, once confident in its unstoppable power, had been shaken. They had underestimated the human battleship, and the consequences were now clear. For the first time, their dominance was questioned, not just by their enemies, but by the citizens of the very systems they had ruled for decades. Everywhere, whispers of hope grew louder. Ordinary people who had spent generations hiding in fear now dared to imagine that freedom was possible. The human crew did not pause to celebrate. They knew that one battle did not win a war. The alien fleet was vast, powerful, and relentless. But the first engagement had shown them something important. Intelligence, strategy, and courage could level the playing field. Every move from here on would be crucial. They began to plan carefully, not just for defense, but for a campaign that could change the course of the galaxy. The first step was to connect with those who had long suffered in silence. Small resistance groups hidden on countless planets had survived in the shadows. They had intelligence networks, small fleets, and knowledge of the local systems that even the invaders could not fully understand. The human battleship reached out to them using secure transmissions, sharing information, guidance, and hope. They did not ask for loyalty or obedience. They offered partnership, strategy, and protection. The response was overwhelming. Groups that had long feared discovery now dared to emerge. Fleets that had hidden in the outer edges of systems prepared to act. Civilians who had spent decades hiding began repairing old ships, rebuilding communication networks, and gathering resources for the first time in their lives. The presence of the human battleship inspired not just courage but action. People realized that the fight against the invaders was no longer hopeless. The alien fleet, meanwhile, struggled to understand the sudden change. Their dominance had relied on fear and intimidation. When systems had spoken, it had always been to beg for mercy or submit. Now entire networks of resistance were coordinating, sharing intelligence, and preparing to fight back. The humans were not only challenging them directly, they were changing the mindset of entire civilizations. This was something the invaders had never anticipated, and it shook them more than any weapon ever could. The human vessel became a central figure in the growing resistance. It moved between systems, coordinating attacks, providing tactical guidance, and protecting key planets from alien raids. Each engagement was calculated to maximize the impact without unnecessary destruction. The humans understood that winning hearts and minds was as important as winning battles. Every victory, every safe retreat, every clever maneuver reinforced the belief that the galaxy could be freed from fear. In one system, the human ship helped organize a fleet from 3 previously conquered planets. These small fleets had long been isolated, each afraid to act on its own. With guidance from the human vessel, they coordinated attacks against supply lines, disabling alien ships and reclaiming control of key space routes. The strategy was brilliant not because it destroyed the enemy entirely, but because it shifted the balance. The invaders were forced to react, spread thin across multiple fronts, and reconsider their once unquestioned dominance. The aliens responded with anger and panic. Their commanders issued orders with growing frustration, demanding results from ships that were failing despite overwhelming numbers. They began to realize that brute force alone would no longer be enough. The humans were intelligent, deliberate, and unpredictable. They had demonstrated the ability to anticipate enemy moves and turn each engagement into an advantage. For the first time, the alien fleet experienced true strategic uncertainty, and with it came fear. Meanwhile, on planets previously dominated by fear, ordinary people began to take action. Farmers, miners, engineers, and even students contributed to the resistance. They repaired ships, transported supplies, and shared intelligence. Civilians became part of the fight, not through weapons alone, but through knowledge, planning, and courage. The presence of the human battleship had created a ripple effect across the galaxy, showing that a single determined force could inspire millions to act. The human crew understood the importance of morale. They communicated messages of encouragement, strategic advice, and caution. They emphasized the importance of protecting lives while challenging the invaders. Each success was carefully highlighted, not as a reason for pride, but as proof that cooperation, intelligence, and courage could overcome fear and oppression. These efforts strengthened the bonds between the human vessel and the countless systems now daring to resist. As weeks passed, the alien fleet faced increasing challenges. Supply lines were disrupted. Key systems rebelled. Their ships were constantly harassed and outmaneuvered. The once unstoppable fleet was now stretched thin, its confidence eroded, and its command structure strained under pressure. Every day, the humans and their allies advanced their strategies, turning chaos into opportunity. The invaders were no longer masters of the galaxy. They were being challenged at every turn. In one decisive maneuver, the human ship coordinated an ambush against a portion of the alien fleet, attempting to reclaim a strategic system. Using decoys, speed, and precise strikes, the humans and local resistance forces disabled half of the attacking ships without major losses. The victory was significant not only tactically but psychologically. The aliens realized that their technology and numbers alone could not guarantee control. Meanwhile, systems that had long been silent and oppressed began to coordinate openly, inspired by the human vessel's precision and courage. The impact of these events spread like wildfire. News transmissions, once dominated by fear and oppression, now carried stories of hope. Civilian communities rallied behind resistance forces, providing intelligence, resources, and moral support. The human battleship had become a symbol, a reminder that courage and intelligence could challenge even the most powerful adversary. Ordinary people, once resigned to hiding, now dared to dream of freedom. The alien fleet tried to adapt. They deployed larger, more heavily armed ships and attempted to isolate the human vessel. But the humans anticipated these moves. Their strategy relied not on raw power but on intelligence, timing, and flexibility. They struck weak points, avoided unnecessary confrontation, and coordinated with resistance groups to maximize impact. Each encounter left the invaders frustrated, confused, and increasingly fearful. As resistance grew, the humans focused on protection as much as attack. They ensured that reclaimed planets remained safe from retaliation, reinforcing defenses and training local fleets. They taught systems how to organize, anticipate enemy movements, and protect civilians. By empowering the galaxy itself, they created a network of resilience that could survive even if the human ship was temporarily absent. The approach was as much about building confidence and hope as it was about winning battles. Over time, the alien fleet became desperate. Their once unquestioned control was slipping. Communication lines were disrupted. Supply routes were cut. Entire systems were rebelling simultaneously. The humans had not destroyed the fleet outright, but they had turned the galaxy against it, showing that fear was no longer absolute. The invaders had to fight on multiple fronts, constantly adjusting to new tactics and facing resistance they had not anticipated. The human crew remained vigilant. They knew that the invaders would not give up easily, and that mistakes could have catastrophic consequences. Every move was calculated, balancing offense and defense, strategy and protection. Their goal was not simply to win battles, but to change the way the galaxy thought about fear, courage, and resistance. And in doing so, they inspired hope, courage, and action across countless systems. By the end of this phase, the galaxy was no longer a place of silence and fear. Resistance movements flourished. Civilians dared to speak, share intelligence, and prepare for future actions. The alien fleet, once the dominant power, was now stretched thin, its confidence shaken and its future uncertain. The human battleship had not only challenged the invaders, it had inspired the galaxy itself to rise. The turning point had arrived. The alien fleet had been forced to confront a truth it had never faced before. Intelligence, strategy, and courage could overcome even overwhelming power. The humans had shown that hope was more powerful than fear, and that one determined force could inspire millions to act. The galaxy had begun to fight back, and the invaders had no idea what was coming next. The galaxy had never felt so alive. For decades, civilizations had lived under fear, hiding in shadows, whispering in secret and praying that the alien fleet would pass them by. And now, for the first time in history, the people saw a force that could stand up to the invaders, a human battleship that had changed the course of hope. The first battles were won, systems were reclaiming control, and the alien fleet was being forced into retreat. But even as celebrations quietly began, the work was far from over. The human vessel remained vigilant. The crew knew that the invaders, although shaken, were not yet defeated. They had faced countless systems and destroyed civilizations with efficiency and ruthlessness. Now they were cautious, clever, and angry. Any mistake could be catastrophic. Yet the human crew moved with calm determination. They had already shown the galaxy that courage and intelligence could match power. Now they needed to solidify that hope and protect the gains made so far. Across liberated systems, people were beginning to rebuild. Cities that had long been abandoned were slowly being repopulated. Supply lines and communication networks once cut off by the aliens were being restored. Local fleets, guided by the human vessel, were organizing to defend their systems and prevent future attacks. For the first time in generations, ordinary citizens were participating in the defense and governance of their own worlds. They were not just witnesses, they were part of the change. The alien fleet, now stretched thin and reeling from their unexpected losses, attempted to regroup. They sent larger forces to intimidate reclaimed systems, hoping to strike fear back into the hearts of the population. But the humans anticipated these moves. Using intelligence gathered from local resistance networks, the human vessel coordinated defensive measures, preparing ambushes and protective strategies that minimized damage to civilians. Every action was deliberate, precise, and focused on both survival and the preservation of hope. On planets recently freed from alien control, people watched the skies with a new sense of pride and awe. Children who had never known safety now learned about courage and resilience. Farmers, engineers, and traders who had long hidden from the fleet now repaired ships, maintained communication networks, and even joined local defense forces. The human vessel had become more than a ship. It was a symbol, a living proof that oppression could be challenged and that hope was not lost. The final confrontations with the alien fleet were strategic rather than reckless. The humans did not aim to annihilate the enemy entirely. Their goal was to force the invaders to retreat while protecting civilians and preserving the systems that had been liberated. Battles were precise and coordinated, exploiting weaknesses the aliens could not anticipate. Within weeks, the aliens found themselves outmaneuvered at almost every turn. Their once absolute control had fractured, and their confidence had been shattered. During this campaign, the human crew displayed extraordinary tactical brilliance. They moved between systems, guiding fleets that had been isolated for decades, teaching them to coordinate attacks and defenses. They shared intelligence, highlighted weaknesses in alien formations, and ensured that liberated systems were able to defend themselves even in the absence of the human battleship. Each successful operation inspired hope, courage, and action across the galaxy. Ordinary people, once resigned to hiding, were now participating actively in the fight for freedom. The alien commanders, unable to predict or counter the human strategies, became increasingly desperate. They realized that their technology and numbers, which had guaranteed dominance for decades, were insufficient against this new approach. The human vessel had proven that intelligence, planning, and determination could overcome raw power. They faced a truth they had never encountered before. Fear alone was no longer enough to control the galaxy. Eventually, the alien fleet began a strategic retreat. Their remaining ships pulled back to distant sectors, abandoning several systems they had once controlled. The humans did not chase recklessly. Instead, they ensured that the retreat was complete, protecting newly freed planets and preventing sudden counterattacks. This careful strategy emphasized the message that the galaxy was no longer theirs to dominate, and that the power of courage and strategy could withstand even overwhelming force. In liberated systems, celebrations began quietly at first. Citizens repaired damaged structures, reopened marketplaces, and restored communications. Farmers and engineers worked together to rebuild infrastructure, while small fleets patrolled local space to ensure security. The presence of the human battleship inspired ongoing vigilance and cooperation. Even after the alien fleet retreated, the galaxy had learned that unity, strategy, and courage were essential to lasting peace. The human vessel, although central to the campaign, did not linger in victory. Its mission was to inspire and guide, not to conquer. After ensuring the immediate safety of liberated systems, it moved to distant regions, signaling other hidden groups of resistance and offering guidance. Its legacy was not measured in destruction of the enemy alone, but in the empowerment of countless civilizations across the galaxy. Ordinary people now had the tools, confidence, and organization to defend themselves. The hope sparked by the ship had become a movement. The alien fleet, once seen as unstoppable, had been humbled. Their retreat marked the first major shift in power the galaxy had witnessed in generations. Systems that had been silent for decades now coordinated openly. Intelligence networks previously isolated began sharing information. Civilian populations, inspired by the human vessel, engaged in rebuilding, training, and defense. The presence of the ship had changed not just the physical balance of power, but the mindset of the galaxy itself. As months passed, the human crew continued to work strategically, visiting systems that had been hardest hit, providing support, and ensuring that no sudden gaps in defense could allow the invaders to return. Each interaction, each act of guidance reinforced the idea that courage, intelligence, and collaboration were stronger than fear and oppression. The galaxy, long dominated by despair, was now a network of hope, resilience, and action. The impact of these events would be remembered for generations. Tales of the human battleship spread from system to system, inspiring those who had never fought to stand up for themselves, and those who had long given up hope to believe in possibility. Children learned stories of courage that were no longer abstract. They were living history, witnessed and influenced directly by the presence of a single determined force. Even the alien fleet, now scattered and cautious, carried the knowledge of their first real defeat. They would never again assume that fear alone could dominate the galaxy. They had faced a force that combined intelligence, strategy, and human determination, and it had changed everything. The invaders learned that no matter how powerful a force might seem, courage and resilience could shift the balance, inspire resistance, and reclaim freedom. In the end, the human battleship left a lasting legacy. It was not just a weapon, it was a symbol of possibility, a living reminder that even in the darkest times, one determined force could inspire millions to act. Entire civilizations, once silent and oppressed, were now ready to govern, defend, and thrive. The galaxy had been forever changed, not only by the battles fought but by the courage and intelligence that guided them. And so, as the human vessel moved into the distance, systems across the galaxy continued to rebuild, communicate, and organize. The alien fleet, though not entirely destroyed, had been forced into retreat. Fear no longer ruled the hearts of the galaxy's inhabitants. Courage, strategy, and collaboration had triumphed. The galaxy had learned that hope could not be extinguished, and that even the most overwhelming forces could be challenged when determination and intelligence worked together. The era of fear was over. A new era had begun, one of resilience, cooperation, and hope. And it all started with the appearance of one human battleship that refused to yield, that fought not for glory, but for the lives and freedom of millions across the stars. For the first time, the galaxy knew that no force, no matter how terrifying, could hold them forever.